I moved into my apartment in a quiet suburb in Ohio during the fall semester of 2019. The building was older, built in the 70s, with creaking floors, narrow hallways, and peeling paint in some corners, but it had a charm that drew me in. I liked the quiet, liked the idea of living somewhere predictable after 4 years of dorm chaos. My neighbors were mostly older people or young couples, and the building had that weird energy that only older complexes have. Everyone keeps to themselves, but you always know someone is around. My immediate neighbor was a man in his late 40s, maybe early 50s, who lived directly next door. I only knew his name because the maintenance team left a notice about his apartment once. He was quiet, polite if you nodded in the hallway, and kept to himself. I had no reason to think he was anything other than a normal neighbor, until the note started. The first note appeared about 2 weeks after I moved in. I found it taped to my door in the early evening. It wasn't threatening, not at first glance. Just a simple message in neat, precise handwriting. I saw you taking the trash out. Hope you're settling in okay. At first I laughed it off. Weird but harmless. Probably a friendly gesture from a concerned neighbor. I crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. The next note came 3 days later. You were laughing with your friend in the hallway. It sounded nice. Keep smiling. That's when the unease started. The notes weren't threatening, they were oddly personal, strangely observant. I hadn't told anyone about my conversations in the hallways, and yet he seemed to know exactly what I was doing. I confronted him once when I saw him in the stairwell. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual. Do you write these notes? He looked at me blankly, then smiled politely. I like to check in on my neighbors. It's nothing serious. I nodded and walked away, but something in his tone didn't sit right. His eyes lingered on me longer than polite, and there was a subtle, almost imperceptible smirk that vanished when he realized I was paying attention. After that, the notes became more frequent. Sometimes they were comments. You're wearing a jacket you wore yesterday. I noticed. I heard music coming from your apartment. Good taste. Sometimes they were just observations. The light in your kitchen was on for exactly 17 minutes tonight. I started feeling watched. At first, I chalked it up to paranoia. Maybe he was just eccentric, maybe he kept the habit of noting things about people. But then I started noticing him in places he shouldn't be. He was always there when I came home from work, standing by his door, or sometimes just in the stairwell, leaning on the railing, seemingly reading the hallway signage. I never noticed him leave his apartment, yet somehow he was always in the hall at night. One night, around 11:30 p.m., I returned from a late study session at a friend's house. The building was quiet. No one else was in the hall. I walked toward my apartment and froze. He was standing outside his door, staring at the floor. I nodded politely, but he didn't respond. I reached for my keys, and when I glanced up, he was gone. The strange part was, the door to his apartment was still closed. I started leaving lights on, installing a small camera over my front door. I wasn't sure what I expected to catch, but I needed proof. The next morning, I reviewed the footage. He hadn't left his apartment. Yet, there he was, standing in the hallway, watching me enter my apartment at 11:30 p.m. exactly. No movement to or from his door. Just appeared. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I'd imagined him. Maybe the camera glitched. I wanted to ignore it. But the notes kept coming, and the observations got more invasive. I saw you making coffee at 7:12 a.m. You didn't notice me. Your shower ran for 12 minutes. Very consistent. It felt like every small movement in my apartment, every trivial action, was cataloged. I tried telling myself he was harmless, maybe lonely, maybe just obsessive, but the fear had started to grow. One Friday night, I stayed late at a friend's apartment watching movies. Around midnight, I decided to call it a night and left. I walked to the building and noticed something strange immediately. All the lights in the stairwell were off, except for a faint glow coming from the crack under his apartment door. My stomach sank. I went inside, locked my door, and reviewed my camera footage. I expected to see him watching from the hall. What I saw instead made my blood run cold. The camera showed him standing in the hallway outside my apartment for exactly 15 minutes, but that wasn't the horrifying part. Every few seconds, a shadow moved past him. Not like a person walking, more like something brushing against him, following his movements. When I rewound frame by frame, the shadows seemed to linger behind my neighbor, touching the walls, slipping into corners, vanishing when the camera angle shifted. I didn't sleep that night. The following week, the notes changed tone. They weren't just observations anymore. I like watching you. You don't notice me, but I see everything. I know when you're awake. I know when you're alone. I didn't leave my apartment for 2 days. I kept checking the cameras obsessively. Every angle of my hallways, every stairwell, every corner, I watched for him. And I saw him. Always there. Never entering his apartment, never leaving the hallways, just appearing when I wasn't looking. One morning, I woke up to find a note taped to my front door, written in the same neat handwriting. You can't hide. I'm inside. I froze. My apartment was locked. No one should be inside. I called the police. They came, checked every corner. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, no one inside. I asked if they could check my cameras. The footage only showed my neighbor appearing outside my door for 15 minutes at 3 a.m., then disappearing. Again, no evidence of how he got there. I tried moving out, but the fear followed me. After I left, I still received notes slipped under my new apartment door. They weren't signed, but the handwriting matched exactly. Months later, I looked back at the footage one more time. I paused at one frame where he's standing in the hallway outside my door. If you look closely, behind him, in the shadow, you can see a faint outline of someone or something mirroring his movements perfectly. Something not real, something that wasn't human. I don't live there anymore. I haven't returned. But sometimes when I check my mail or step outside my apartment at night, I feel the same presence. Watching, cataloging, waiting. I've learned one thing. Some neighbors aren't just quiet. Some are patient. And some never leave. I had lived in the same suburban apartment complex for about 6 months when I started noticing him. He wasn't my next-door neighbor this time. He was across the hall on the other side of the building, but he had that same unnerving energy you could feel without knowing why. Quiet, polite, never speaking unless forced, yet somehow always there in your peripheral vision. It began with the windows. My apartment faced the inner courtyard, and every night around 11 p.m., I noticed a shadow in the window across the hall. At first, I thought it was my imagination. There wasn't supposed to be anyone in that apartment at that hour, and even if there was, why would someone be standing just watching? I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the apartment was empty, and the shadow was a trick of the streetlight or passing car headlights. But soon I noticed patterns. Every night, the figure stood there at exactly the same time, never moving, never leaving, never doing anything except watching. I decided to set up a small security camera in my living room. I figured if someone was truly there, I could record it. The footage confirmed what I feared. Every night at 11 p.m. sharp, a man would appear outside my window. He never touched the glass, never knocked, just stared. Sometimes I would watch him on the feed in real time. Other times I pretended to ignore him. But he never wavered, never blinked, just watched. I started leaving my apartment at night, walking through the hallways. I wanted to confront him, wanted to see if he was real, human, normal. But every time I did, he disappeared. Just like that. 1 second he was there, standing in the light of a neighbor's doorway, the next, nothing. The fear escalated over weeks. I began sleeping with my curtains drawn, lights on, doors locked. But that didn't stop him. Some nights, I would wake up and feel like I was being watched from inside my apartment. The camera feed showed nothing. No one in the hallways, no one in the courtyard. And yet, I could feel it. Then the note started. The first one was taped to my window one morning. Nice curtains. They block a lot, but not everything. I froze. Someone had been inside my apartment. I checked the locks, the windows, the doors. Everything was intact. Nothing was missing. Nothing was out of place. Yet the handwriting was neat, precise, familiar. The next note came 3 days later. I like it when you leave the lights on. It's easier to see. By now, I was paranoid. Every small sound, the creak of a floorboard, the hum of the refrigerator, set me on edge. I started keeping a flashlight near my bed, my phone ready. I considered moving, but something in me felt like that would only make him more patient, more observant. One night, I decided to stay awake and watch the window. Around 11:05 p.m., a shadow appeared again like clockwork. I sat very still, breathing slowly, pretending to sleep. The figure didn't move for 15 minutes. Then, just as I thought it might leave, it raised its hand and tapped gently on the glass. I jumped back, heart racing. When I looked again, he was gone. No footprints in the courtyard, No evidence he'd even been outside. The window was intact. Nothing broken. Just gone. I called the police that morning. They came, checked the building's security logs, the surrounding apartments, even the courtyard cameras. Nothing. No one had been outside my window. No one had entered or exited the building at that time. I tried to go back to normal life. I ignored the shadow, ignored the notes. But the subtle signs kept appearing. My apartment door was slightly ajar one morning, though I remembered locking it. My shoes weren't in the same place. A light switch was flipped. A small, almost imperceptible smudge on my mirror. I knew he was inside, or at least had been. Yet there was no proof. No cameras, no footage, nothing to explain what I was experiencing. Weeks later, I started hearing noises in the hallways at night. Footsteps pacing slowly, always stopping outside my door. Sometimes whispers, indistinct words that didn't make sense. When I checked the camera, the hallway was empty. The walls seemed to bend. I started documenting everything. Every movement, every shadow, every sound. I started noticing patterns. The taps on the window always came in threes. The footsteps in the hall would always pause for exactly 30 seconds outside my door before fading. The lights flickered only when I tried to watch him or confront him. The final note came just after midnight, slipped under my door. I know you're watching me. Don't turn around. I froze. My security camera feed showed the hallway empty. My front door locked. My window closed. Yet I felt him. Behind me. Waiting. I never saw him in person after that. Not physically. But the presence never left. I moved out a month later, but even now, when I watch a security camera feed, any feed, I feel that same deliberate gaze, counting, observing, patient. Some neighbors aren't just quiet. Some never leave. I moved into my first apartment after college in the summer of 2020. The complex was newer than most, 2 stories with beige siding and dark green trim. I thought it would be safe. Quiet neighbors, security cameras in the hallways, a small courtyard where people walk their dogs. That illusion ended the day I noticed my neighbor, a man in his mid-40s, standing outside my door at 2 a.m. I had been asleep, the kind of deep sleep you only get when you've worked 12 hours in a row. I woke to the sound of my front door rattling slightly. At first, I thought it was the wind, but something told me to look at the peephole. I froze. He was standing there, just looking at the door, hands in his pockets. I didn't move. He didn't knock or ring. Just stared. I waited, pretending to sleep. Eventually, the rattling stopped. I didn't breathe until morning. The next night he was back. This time, the building's security cameras caught him. I reviewed the footage the following morning. He wasn't approaching my door from the hallway like a normal person would. He appeared directly outside my apartment, standing there for 20 minutes. Then he disappeared as if he had never been there. I tried rationalizing it. Maybe he had a key. Maybe he was maintenance. But no one had entered my apartment. Nothing was stolen, nothing touched. Then the packages started disappearing. I lived alone and I ordered groceries, small electronics, things that would usually sit by my door for hours before I picked them up. But every time I checked, they were gone. No security footage showed anyone taking them. No doors opened that weren't supposed to. It wasn't theft in the traditional sense. Instead, when I arrived home, I sometimes found packages left back on my porch, but rearranged. One box, for example, would be standing upright when I knew I left it on its side. A bag of groceries would be unsealed, a single item removed, and the rest placed neatly inside. It felt like someone was testing me, watching me, cataloging my habits. I tried confronting him in the hallway once. "Hey," I said, casual but firm. "Have you been messing with my packages?" He looked at me, expression blank. Then he smiled. Not friendly, not polite, just a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I just like helping neighbors. I wanted to walk away, but something about him made me pause. I knew he was lying, and I knew he knew I knew. That moment, those few seconds, stayed with me for weeks. The next note came 3 nights later, slipped under my door. "I like seeing you pick up your deliveries. It's fun to watch." At that point, I realized this wasn't normal. I set up extra cameras in the hallway, at my front door, even in my small kitchen. I wanted proof. I wanted evidence. The footage was worse than I imagined. Every night, at some point, he would appear on camera. Not entering, not touching anything, just there. standing in the hallway, leaning against the wall, watching me. Sometimes the footage showed him walking past my door repeatedly, then vanishing mid-step. Sometimes my packages would move just before he appeared, as though he was orchestrating it in real time. I stopped ordering things online. I stopped leaving anything visible by the door. I started sleeping with the lights on, the door locked, the blinds drawn. But he didn't stop. One night, I woke to the faint sound of someone in my kitchen. I didn't move. My heart pounded. I whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. Nothing. But the faint hum of the refrigerator sounded wrong, like it had been touched. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The kitchen was empty. Everything was in place, except one small detail. The package I had received that afternoon, my groceries, was now neatly arranged on the counter, a single apple cut in half. I called the building manager the next morning. "Has anyone been entering apartments?" I asked. "No," he said. "Only maintenance has keys and they would have signed in." "But someone's inside," I said. He chuckled nervously. "Maybe you're imagining things. It's late at night. People see shadows. Maybe you're stressed." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to move on. But then I noticed it. The cameras weren't lying. Every night he appeared. And every night packages moved, items were subtly rearranged, notes appeared. Sometimes typed, sometimes handwritten. The final note came taped to my refrigerator. "I like to help. Don't be afraid. I'll only move what you don't notice." I couldn't eat the apple. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't ignore the feeling that someone, or something, was always inside, always watching, always cataloging. I moved 2 weeks later. Even now, I avoid leaving packages outside my door. Even now, I check the hallways obsessively when I enter a building. And every time I see someone standing silently, just observing, I feel the same dread, the quiet certainty that patience can be scarier than rage, that observation can be more terrifying than confrontation. Some neighbors don't just watch. Some study you quietly, methodically, until they know exactly what to touch, what to move, and how to make you realize you are never alone. I had lived in the same apartment complex for almost a year when the late-night loiterer started. It wasn't my apartment this time. It was my friend's. She had moved in a few months before me, and I often stayed over for long study sessions or weekend movie nights. Her apartment was on the ground floor, near the back entrance of the building. She was new to the area, quiet, friendly, and completely unaware that someone in the building had started paying way too much attention. The first time I noticed him, I thought nothing of it. I stepped outside to take out the trash around 11:45 p.m., and I saw a man standing near the far corner of the courtyard. He wasn't doing anything, just standing, arms crossed, watching the building. At the time, I assumed it was another resident or someone waiting for a ride. I didn't think much of it. Over the next week, I noticed a pattern. Every night at roughly the same time he was there. Sometimes he shifted positions slightly, sometimes he seemed to move closer to her apartment entrance, but never directly outside the door. Just observing. I mentioned it to my friend. She shrugged. Maybe he works nights? Maybe he's homeless. I wasn't so sure. One night we stayed up late working on a project. Around 12:30 a.m. I decided to check the building cameras. I knew there was a small security feed that covered the back entrance, mostly used by the manager. I wasn't supposed to have access, but a friend in IT helped me log in remotely. I wish I hadn't. The feed showed him standing exactly where I had seen him in the courtyard. But then he started moving. Slowly, deliberately. He wasn't walking along the path. He was gliding, or at least that's how it looked. The movement was unnatural, like he was almost floating a few inches above the ground. My stomach dropped. He paused outside my friend's apartment door. Then the footage froze for a second, and when it resumed, he was gone. The door remained locked. No one entered or exited. Nothing. Yet, the next morning, we found the doormat slightly shifted, and her shoes, which were neatly placed the night before, were scattered. I tried telling myself it was coincidence. But over the following days, the incidents became more direct. Packages left outside her door were moved. A chair by the balcony was overturned. The balcony light flickered even when no one touched it. I set up my own camera that evening in the living room, aiming at the front door and balcony. I wanted proof. I wanted something concrete. What I saw chilled me. At 12:47 a.m., the camera caught him standing in the courtyard, then moving toward the building. But the doors were locked. No one entered through the main entrance. He appeared outside her apartment door, then vanished. The door remained locked, no signs of forced entry. Then came the first note. You're careful, but not careful enough. It was slipped under the door. Handwriting neat, precise, almost clinical. My friend was terrified. She refused to leave the apartment alone for the next week. I stayed with her one night. Around 1 a.m., I heard a soft tapping on the window. I froze. I didn't breathe. I slowly turned toward the balcony window. He was standing there, outside, on the other side of the glass, arms crossed, watching us. I screamed. My friend tried to calm me down. Call the police, she whispered. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911. The operator told us to stay inside, lock the doors. We did. The dispatcher promised officers would arrive. 15 minutes later, the hallway and courtyard were empty. No sign of him. No sign of anyone. We reviewed the camera footage the next morning. The feed had recorded him standing in the hallway outside her apartment for 10 minutes, then appearing on the balcony, then disappearing completely. Again, no evidence of entry or exit. After that night, the incidents became routine. The tapping, the moving objects, the notes. Sometimes, the lights in the hallway would flicker when I entered my friend's apartment. Sometimes, faint footsteps echoed outside the door when no one was there. The final incident happened one Thursday. My friend was asleep. I was awake, reviewing the security footage on my laptop. Around 12:58 a.m., the feed showed him standing outside the apartment again. But this time, the camera caught something else. A shadow. Behind him. Not attached to him, not reflecting him, just there. A thin, dark figure, barely distinguishable from the night, mirrored his movements. When he raised his hand, the shadow raised its own, slightly delayed. When he disappeared, the shadow lingered for a moment longer, then vanished. I shut the laptop and didn't speak for a long time. I couldn't explain it. Nothing about this was explainable. The next morning, we found a final note, taped to the inside of her fridge. I've always been here, and I always will be. We moved out a week later. I don't know if he was ever caught, if he even existed in the way we thought. All I know is, every time I walk past a courtyard or see someone standing silently across the hall, arms crossed, watching, I feel that same creeping dread. Some neighbors don't just linger, they study. They wait. And sometimes they're not alone. I never thought much about my neighbors when I first moved into the old apartment building in New Jersey. It was a modest complex, 2 stories, brick exterior, with a tiny parking lot in front and a chain-link fence around the courtyard. I had moved in during the winter of 2018, looking for a quiet place to recover from a hectic year of college. The first few weeks were uneventful. People kept to themselves. The usual small talk in the mailroom, nods in the hallways, nothing remarkable. My apartment was on the 2nd floor at the very end of the hall. That's where I first noticed him. The man in the apartment directly across from mine. He was normal at first glance. A little older, maybe in his late 40s, with thinning hair and glasses. Always polite, always quiet. But there was something off. Something in the way he watched the building, the hallways, even when no one was around. I didn't pay it much attention. The first sign came in the form of the trash. One evening, I took the garbage down and noticed a pair of eyes in the shadows near the dumpster. He was there, just standing, staring at me. When I nodded, he smiled politely and walked away. I thought it was odd, but didn't worry too much. Weeks later, I started noticing small things inside my apartment. Nothing major, just little shifts. A chair slightly angled differently, the kitchen light on when I was certain I'd turned it off, my shoes moved just a bit. I chalked it up to forgetfulness. Then the first note appeared. I like knowing when you're home. It was slipped under my door. I froze. I hadn't told anyone about my schedule, hadn't mentioned when I was leaving or coming back. The handwriting was neat, precise, almost clinical. From that moment, things escalated. I started noticing him everywhere. Not just in the hallways, but outside my windows. Sometimes I'd see a shadow flit across the courtyard, always in the same spot, always lingering a few seconds before disappearing. Other times, packages I ordered were opened slightly, rearranged, or missing entirely. I tried to catch him. I set up cameras inside my apartment, aiming at the doors and windows. I even added a small motion sensor near the balcony. That's when I realized the terrifying part. The cameras never caught him entering. He was in the footage, standing in the living room looking at me, then gone a few seconds later, as if he had simply appeared. I began sleeping with the lights on, the door locked, the blinds closed. Still, the notes kept coming. You make it easy to watch. I like the way you walk to the kitchen at night. Your door was slightly unlocked. Don't forget next time. It was never threatening in the way you expect. No demands, no threats of violence. Just observation, patience, awareness. One night, around 2 a.m., I woke to a noise outside my bedroom window. A faint scratching sound, like someone tapping their nails gently against the glass. I froze, barely breathing. I reached for my phone to check the camera feed. The footage showed him standing on the balcony outside the window. He wasn't trying to hide. He was just there, watching. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But something stopped me. Something in the way he looked, calm, patient, deliberate, made me realize there was no running, no escaping. Over the next month, I tried everything. I changed my schedule, stopped ordering packages, even slept in different rooms. It didn't matter. He was always there. Outside the window, in the hallway, in the footage. And sometimes when I checked the cameras, I would see something else. A faint shadow just behind him, mimicking his movements, but delayed by a second or two. I couldn't explain it. Then came the final incident. I had been working late at night on a paper, headphones on, music playing softly. Around midnight, I heard a faint whisper, almost imperceptible, coming from the hall. I took off my headphones and strained to listen. You're alone. I froze. My heart raced. I didn't know how he had spoken, how he could be there without being there. I turned on the camera feed immediately. The hallway was empty. No movement. Nothing. I stepped toward the door, hand trembling on the doorknob. That's when I noticed it. The note slipped under my door, neatly typed this time. I've been inside when you weren't looking. I know every corner of this apartment. I always will. The sense of violation hit me harder than any threat ever could. I knew he had been inside my apartment. I knew it wasn't imagination. Every subtle shift in objects, every moved chair, every misaligned picture frame confirmed it. But the cameras couldn't capture how he had done it. There was no sign of entry, no forced locks, nothing to explain how he had appeared inside my apartment undetected. I moved out the next morning. I left everything behind except the essentials. The building manager asked if I wanted to file a police report. I didn't. What could I say? Someone who never enters, who never touches, who only watches, can't be caught. Even after I moved, I couldn't shake it. I would occasionally see him in my dreams, standing silently outside doors, on balconies, in hallways, always watching, always patient. And I would wake up in a cold sweat, feeling the same dread, the same certainty that some people, some neighbors, are never really gone. The worst part? I've realized since then that it isn't just him. It could be anyone. That quiet, polite neighbor, the one who never speaks, who never seems to notice you. Sometimes they're not just keeping to themselves. Sometimes they're waiting, patient, observant, and you never know when they'll step inside your life or your home without a trace. Some neighbors are dangerous not because they act violently. They're dangerous because they make you question reality. They make you doubt what you saw, what you felt, what you thought was safe. And they do it all quietly, deliberately, without ever raising suspicion. I don't live in apartments anymore. I rent a house with a security system, cameras, and motion detectors. I check everything obsessively. And sometimes when I see a shadow in the corner of my eye, or someone standing too still across the street, I feel that same creeping dread, the memory of him, and I realize some neighbors never really leave.